You're cruising down Ocean Drive in a stolen Ferrari. Neon lights reflecting off your aviators, cocaine deals going down on every corner, and I Ran by flock of seagulls pumping through your speakers. This is Vice City, Rockstar's satirical masterpiece of 1980s excess. But what if I told you that almost everything you just imagined actually happened? What if the most outrageous missions, the most unbelievable characters, and the most insane criminal schemes in Vice City weren't the product of some game developer's wild imagination, but careful recreations of real events that turned Miami into America's cocaine capital? Today, we're diving into the true stories behind one of gaming's most beloved worlds, and what we discover might change how you see both the game and the decade that inspired it forever. The year was 1979. Miami was a sleepy retirement city with an aging population and a struggling economy. Fast forward just 5 years to 1984, and it had transformed into something that looked more like a war zone than an American city.
According to FBI statistics, Miami's murder rate had skyrocketed by 400%. The city was experiencing an average of one drug-related killing every day. Bodies were piling up in morgues so fast that the medical examiner had to rent refrigerated trucks from Burger King to store the overflow. This wasn't fiction. This was the cocaine Cowboys era, and it provided the exact blueprint for everything we'd later see in Vice City. The transformation began with geography and politics. Miami sat perfectly positioned as the gateway between South America's coca fields and North America's eager nostrils. When political upheaval in Colombia pushed major trafficking operations northward, and the Mariel boat lift brought 125,000 Cuban refugees to Miami in 1980, including, according to Castro's own admission, thousands of criminals he deliberately emptied from his prisons, the city became a perfect storm. The money was absolutely staggering. According to Federal Reserve data analyzed in Guy Gugliotta's book, Kings of Cocaine, by 1981, Miami banks were reporting a cash surplus of over $5 billion annually, more than all other Federal Reserve districts combined. The only logical explanation? Drug money. Banks weren't just turning a blind eye, they were actively courting narco dollars. The Great American Bank, later exposed in federal investigations, had special Colombian windows where no questions were asked about cash deposits. Sound familiar? It should, because Vice City's mission, the Malibu Club, features almost identical money laundering operations. But the real inspiration for Vice City's criminal underworld came from the Cowboys themselves, the traffickers who turned Miami into their personal playground.
Take Mario Tabro, known as the Animal Man. This isn't a Vice City character. This was a real drug lord who ran a $75 million operation while simultaneously operating an exotic animal dealership. His legitimate business became the perfect front for his cocaine empire, and when rivals threatened him, he'd feed them to his lions and tigers, literally. If that sounds like something straight out of a Vice City mission, that's because it essentially was. The game's character, Ken Rosenberg, with his exotic car dealership and underground connections, bears striking similarities to these real-world figures who used legitimate businesses as elaborate fronts. The violence was even more extreme than anything Vice City dared portray. The Dadeland Mall Massacre of 1979 saw gunmen with automatic weapons chase rivals through a crowded shopping center in broad daylight, leaving 2 dead and launching a chain reaction of retaliatory hits that would define the decade. Griselda Blanco, known as the godmother of cocaine, pioneered drive-by shootings from motorcycles, orchestrated public assassinations, and, according to DEA estimates, was responsible for over 200 murders. Her innovation? Using young children as hitmen because they couldn't be prosecuted as adults. Her trademark? A preference for killing people in public to send messages to rivals. The DEA's Operation Greenice, detailed in federal court records, revealed that major traffickers were moving literally tons of cocaine through Miami monthly, generating cash so fast that they measured it by weight rather than counting it. One seized stash house contained $20 million in small bills that weighed over 3,000 pounds.
But here's where the story gets complicated, and where critics of Vice City raise valid concerns. Because while these events absolutely happened, there's a crucial difference between historical documentation and entertainment adaptation. Vice City, for all its apparent realism, against Vice City's aesthetic, created a dangerous mythology around what was actually devastating urban warfare. The real cocaine cowboys era wasn't stylish criminals in pastel suits having philosophical conversations about the nature of power. It was families destroyed by addiction, entire neighborhoods turned into war zones, and a generation of young people whose only economic opportunity was joining an industry that had a mortality rate higher than combat soldiers. According to Miami-Dade police records from the period, the average life expectancy of a street-level cocaine dealer was less than 2 years. These weren't glamorous anti-heroes. They were often teenagers with no other options, recruited into an industry that treated human life as completely disposable. Some gaming critics and cultural analysts argue that by transforming this tragedy into entertainment, Vice City committed a form of cultural appropriation, taking the pain of real communities and repackaging it as consequence-free fun for a predominantly white, suburban gaming audience.
The real victims of the cocaine cowboys era were rarely the flashy kingpins who inspired Vice City's characters. They were the thousands of unnamed casualties, the addicts, the innocent bystanders caught in crossfire, the children who grew up in neighborhoods where gunshots were more common than ice cream trucks. Furthermore, some scholars argue that Vice City's portrayal reinforced harmful stereotypes about Latino communities, presenting them primarily through the lens of criminality rather than acknowledging the complex social and economic factors that created these conditions. So how do we reconcile these two realities? How can Vice City be both a faithful adaptation of real events and a problematic glorification of genuine tragedy? The answer might lie in understanding what Vice City was actually trying to accomplish and what it reveals about us as consumers of this entertainment. Rockstar Games has consistently maintained that their Grand Theft Auto series operates as satire rather than celebration. Dan Houser, the former lead writer, explained in interviews that Vice City was deliberately designed as a critique of 1980s American excess, not a tribute to it.
Look closely at Vice City's narrative structure, and you'll notice something interesting. Every major criminal enterprise ultimately collapses. Every character, motivated purely for greed, meets a violent end. The game's protagonist, Tommy Vercetti, might seem successful, but he's also completely isolated, surrounded by luxury, but incapable of trust or genuine human connection. This mirrors the actual fate of most real cocaine cowboys. Mario Tabrao spent decades in federal prison. Griselda Blanco was assassinated in 2012, killed by the same motorcycle-based method she'd pioneered. The vast majority of the era's major players either died violently or spent their remaining years in maximum security facilities. But here's what's truly fascinating. Vice City didn't invent our fascination with criminal anti-heroes. It tapped into something that was already there. The same decade that produced the real cocaine cowboys also produced Miami Vice, Scarface, and Blow, cultural products that transformed these dark events into entertainment almost immediately. Vice City wasn't the beginning of this trend. It was the culmination of a decades-long process of mythologizing organized crime. And perhaps that reveals something uncomfortable about human nature. We're drawn to stories about people who break society's rules and seem to get away with it, even when we know intellectually that they rarely do. Dr. Franco Ferracuti's research on criminal psychology suggests that crime entertainment serves as a form of safe rebellion, allowing audiences to vicariously experience transgression without real consequences. In this context, Vice City might actually be performing a social function, providing an outlet for antisocial impulses that keeps them contained within fiction. The game's lasting popularity might also reflect something deeper about the 1980s themselves. This was the decade of greed is good, of deregulation, of the idea that moral considerations should take a back seat to market forces. The cocaine cowboys weren't operating outside Reagan-era capitalism. They were taking its core principles to their logical extreme. But this raises bigger questions that extend far beyond any single video game. If we know that crime entertainment can glamorize real violence, do we have a responsibility to consume it differently? Or does the satirical intent absolve creators and consumers of ethical concerns? When we play games like Vice City, are we engaging with history in a way that helps us understand the past? Or are we participating in a form of cultural amnesia that makes it easier to ignore ongoing problems? And perhaps most importantly, what does it say about our society that some of our most popular entertainment is based on periods when our institutions failed most completely?
The cocaine cowboys era happened because legitimate economic opportunities were scarce, because law enforcement was overwhelmed and sometimes corrupt, because international politics created power vacuums that criminals filled. Many of these conditions still exist in different forms today. So when we boot up Vice City and cruise through its neon-soaked streets, are we just having harmless fun, or are we celebrating a system that continues to create real victims? Maybe the most honest thing we can say about Vice City is this: it's a perfect mirror of American culture in the 1980s, both the real version and the version we wanted to believe in. The real Miami of that era was simultaneously America at its most brutal and America at its most glamorous, a place where unimaginable wealth existed alongside devastating poverty, where the American dream was available to anyone willing to completely abandon American values to pursue it. Vice City captures that contradiction perfectly, which might be why it feels so authentic even when we know it's fiction. The game doesn't lie about what the 1980s were, it just packages the truth in a way that lets us enjoy it without having to fully confront what it means. And perhaps that's the most 1980s thing about it of all. What do you think? Does knowing the real history behind Vice City change how you see the game? Are we glorifying real tragedy or processing historical trauma through art? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to hear different perspectives on this. And if you found this deep dive fascinating, hit that subscribe button because we're planning a whole series exploring the real events behind popular culture. Next up, the true stories that inspired Breaking Bad's depiction of the modern drug trade. Until then, maybe the next time you're playing Vice City, you'll remember that every neon-lit street corner represents a real place where real people lived through one of the most chaotic decades in American history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.